In the aftermath of the bloody 7 October assault by Hamas terrorists into the Israeli countryside, where they slaughtered so many hundreds of Israeli civilians and many military targets, now then the world is waiting. Now it's been almost 3 weeks since that happened. And everybody is wondering, when is the Israeli Defense Force going to launch its attack into Gaza? Everybody from the prime minister on down has been saying that they're going to go in to Gaza to destroy Hamas. They're not going to go in to punish them. They just want to destroy the infrastructure. They want to eliminate the threat to Israel so that they don't have to do this anymore. That's what they've said. We actually had on this show I believe it was the UN ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, actually, who said, we're going to get rid of this once and for all. That's their intent. Now, in the aftermath of such a horrific, bloody attack expressly against civilians, everybody understands that Israel not only wants to, but is just in wanting to rectify that situation and to bring punishment onto the Hamas side and to destroy all of those who did that. Everybody understands that. But what is crucial is that Israel also has to have a cool head and a sober spirit to understand what is militarily possible and what is not, and find the line between rushing to failure and taking your time to be prepared so that you have success militarily. Because I can just tell you categorically, if you don't spend the time to prepare and you go in and you rush in, you could actually stumble and fall and have a much more difficult time. And who knows if he could even succeed. The cost is very, very high in blood for Israel to get this right. Now, here's what we had I believe this was yesterday, from the Israeli Minister of Defense, who just kind of underscored that they're ready.
המשיכו להיערך להתקפה כי היא תגיע. אנחנו נערכים ביסודיות, זאת תהיה התקפה קטלנית, זאת תהיה התקפה משולבת מהיבשה, מהים ומהאוויר. עשו את העבודה שלכם, תתכוננו, אנחנו נפעיל אתכם.
Now, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, has actually been involved in some of these fights when he was on active duty, and he underscored how difficult this can be.
They're about to launch this ground offensive in Gaza. You were at CENTCOM. You were the CENTCOM commander when ISIS had control of Mosul, and it took 9 months, but you cleared ISIS out of Mosul. What were the lessons you learned there that apply here?
Well, the first thing that everyone should know, and I think everybody does know, that urban combat is extremely difficult. It goes at a slow pace.
That was 9 months. Nine
Yes.
months of intense combat.
Yes. This may be a bit more difficult because of the underground network of tunnels that that Hamas has constructed over time, and the fact that they've had a long time to prepare for a fight.
Now, in typically understated way, Secretary Austin says, well, this might be a bit more difficult. This is going to be profoundly more difficult, because you have to understand, none of this is a surprise to Hamas. They had months, many months, and in some categories, they actually spent years preparing for this day. But they definitely had specific tactical preparations for months for the defense of Gaza before they ever even launched their attack on the 7th of October, because they have had experience. This is the 5th fight, by the way, between Hamas and Israel, which is why Israel's saying, we're not just going to punish them anymore. We want to destroy them. That's reasonable, and I can certainly understand why they would want to do that. But it's very important that we don't understate the difficulty of that task, because it is extremely difficult. At first, we're going to look at just the tactical implications of this. Now, there was another report out yesterday about the Israeli preparations, and here's what that report looked like.
You actually witnessed Israeli forces training for this ground assault in a mock Gaza city. What was that like to see that up close?
In 5 days flat is they built a mock Gaza city way out in the desert in Negev, and they've been kicking in doors, clearing rooms, and eliminating terrorists as a training exercise within that facility. We got an opportunity to visit it. You've got 19, 20-year-old soldiers. They are raring to go.
Now, I've actually undergone that exact training in my time, because I've had 4 combat deployments of my own, one of which was in Iraq, and 2 of which were in Afghanistan. And some of the training we had prior to going there is exactly that, to clear buildings and to, fight as a stack, they call it, to fight as a team, to coordinate different teams to, as you're going into different areas so that everything is under control. So it is a very, very difficult and bloody kind of fight, we can say. Now, there's a lot of similarities between Mosul, which Secretary Austin mentioned a second ago. There's also some real good correlations between what the U.S. military has done, the Marines and Army specifically, in a place called Fallujah in 2004. I want to show you just a small portion of a report that was done on the Fallujah battle, because you're going to see in some real footage of what those Israeli forces were training to do. Here's what our forces actually did.
My role was an infantry platoon commander, leading a platoon in Fallujah, 3rd Platoon, Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. We were the main effort, which was expected to be thrust against the most difficult part of the enemy's positions, who was as close to hand-to-hand combat as you're going to get. 100% tight concrete streets, 3-story homes surrounded by brick barrier walls, which make the street even feel more constricted. The squad that I was with, we were finding all kinds of weapons caches and fighting positions, had not yet encountered any enemy. Someone from 2nd Squad, maybe a radio operator, reported troops in contact, and perhaps at that point had reported some wounded in action. Myself and the other Marines in the 1st Squad showed up at this house, the house from hell.
Now, the reason I want to point that out and show you those examples is because that was that was our most difficult fight of the entire Iraq War. That we had the highest number of casualties, and it took a long time. And it was, the exact same type of fighting that the Israeli Defense Force is going to have here, with some important differences. First of all, we took 3 full months of preparation before we went into that battle. We isolated the town. We cut it off so that no supplies could get in or out, which is going to be weakening the enemy force and making it hard for them, so that they had limited, even just water to drink, food to eat, and ammunition. So but the remainder of that time was spent conducting what's called intelligence preparation of the battlefield, where, we had drones overhead, we had satellite imagery, we had all kinds of intelligence capacity, signals intelligence, so that we could know what they were doing. And we tried to find out exactly where they were hiding, what the layout of the land was, where any booby traps might be, at least as much as you can, because a lot of that stuff you can't eliminate the risk naturally. But if you have a good idea where it's at, then your plan, then you form a good offensive plan to how you're going to conduct it. Those stack teams, where they're going to go in, what the sequence is going to be, who's going to be providing support on one side, who's going to be having the assault teams, who's protecting the assault teams from other areas of the city at the same time, how you're going to isolate them with deep fires, etc. All those things have to be carefully thought out. They have to be then planned. Everybody has to know the plan. It has to be rehearsed. And then you're going to be ready to go in. Now, if you take that kind of preparation, then your chances for success go way up. If, on the other hand, you get pushed into making an attack before you're ready, then you could suffer a lot more casualties. And I think that it's pretty safe to say that the balance of power between Israel and Hamas is just off the charts in Israel's favor. So even if they did it poorly, then they're probably ultimately going to be able to overcome that and win, but at a much, much higher human cost. Here's our recommendation. I propose that Israel, not that anyone's going to listen to me, let me be clear. If it was me and I was in charge of it, I would delay for at least 3 months for the same reasons here. I would actually make an initial incursion into what's called the Wadi al-Gaza, I believe it is, which basically kind of bisects the whole Gaza Strip in half. And then I separate all the civilian population that they've relocated for the most part to the south. And then we already have the Hamas fighters already cut off on 3 sides. This would then make it the 4th side, to include the ocean on the other side. In that period of time, then the Israeli could again be training, preparing, rehearsing, refining their plan. And at the same time, the Hamas fighters are going to get weaker and weaker and weaker, because all the food and the water has been cut off. So they're just going to be languishing in that desert and in that heat. And, then their morale is going to be going down too. That also, by the way, gives the U.S. and the Israeli side all the more time to negotiate for some hostage release, because that's another big issue. which was not part of the issue in Fallujah. We didn't have that worry. They do. It's a big one. Now, there's a lot of disputes on the, actually, interestingly, on both the Hamas and possibly the Hezbollah side, as well as the Israeli side. Apparently, there's a big rift going on within the Israeli government between the civilian and the military leadership. The military leadership wants to go in right now. They said their troops are already poised. They're already around there. They say they have a plan and they're ready to go right now. And the civilian people are saying, hang on, let's not rush into this. And so it's ironic that you have the military ready to go and the civilian government wanting to hold them back, because oftentimes the civilian government, who doesn't have the knowledge of the military aspects, wants to push people into battle when they're not ready. But this time, at least what's being reported in the Western media today, there's a lot of rift going on. Now, I can understand that because the government actually is coming under a lot of pressure, both from other friendly governments like the United States, as well as their own people, the families of all these hostages. They don't want the military to go rush in there because the chances that the hostages will be killed is much, much higher. And they've seen, in recent days, 2 sets of 2 hostages have been released. So they have some hope that if you just wait a little longer, then you can get some. We know the Qatari government is trying to negotiate up to 70 hostages released. And you can certainly imagine, if that's even a possibility, that all of those families of the somewhere around 200 hostages all want them to wait. Don't go in before, all chances to get them back have been exhausted. Otherwise, they'll die. And so that's a lot of pressure on the civilian government. But militarily, I just can't stress enough that it's really important that the IDF not go in too quickly. Now, what I wish was actually causing the military to be a little bit more hesitant is the fact that it's possible that Hezbollah could launch an attack from the north and to give Israel a 2-front war. So Israel, unlike what we had in Fallujah, has to not only prepare for a high casualty causing incursion into the Gaza Strip, they've also got to prepare for the possibility of a complete new front in the war. So they would have to be fighting on 2 fronts in that same narrow area, and that would stress anybody. And look, Hezbollah is not a nation state military, like the Ukrainian or Russian military, or et cetera. It's still a terrorist organization, but they are very good at what they do. They had a lot of combat experience. They've been well funded. They've got a lot of rockets, 130, 150,000 by some accounts, and some of these are really good rockets. They have air defense capabilities. They have that version of Stingers where they can knock down Israeli jets. I mean, that's something that Israel hasn't faced before and that we didn't face in Fallujah. It was just basically guys with RPGs and machine guns. Israel will have a much tougher task. So their plans have to be, all right, if we go in here, if Hezbollah attacks from the north, what are we going to do? So they've got to have double sets of plans, expecting the worst case to happen and hoping it doesn't. But that's something that Israel is going to really have to worry about. And so this could be a very, very bad situation. And I'm not going to talk about the ramifications if Hezbollah attacks in this video, but that will be coming because it's a big issue of what could happen regionally, and to include the United States. But as the Israel is ready to, poised and ready to go here, by some accounts, it could come very soon. I believe the Minister of Defense in a separate interview said it's going to come soon. So apparently the pressure is quite high. My gut tells me that they're not going to be able to hold off much longer because of the competing pressures to do something quickly. And I wish them well, but I worry about that. And of course, as we say here a lot, I'm also extremely worried about the civil population in the Gaza Strip. I worry a great deal about that because once you get into these kinds of operations, I mean, we're just calling it like it is. The Israeli Defense Forces are almost certainly not going to be distinguished on the battlefield. If they see anybody in this area, they're almost certainly going to consider them a combatant, and they're going to kill everybody that they can. And some of those are certainly going to be civilians, even though they've tried to get them out and they are continuing to do so. It's just inevitable that there's going to be some in there. It's not the so-called collateral damage that kind of dehumanizes people. These are innocent men and women in most cases. I mean, if they're Hamas fighters, fine. They deserve to be punished for what they did. They deserve what they're going to get. But none of the civilians do. Nobody, just like the Israeli civilians didn't deserve what they got, these people don't either. So I hope that they're doing everything they can to get those people out of the way, so and that they do use rules of engagement that limit the damage on the battlefield, and they don't just wantonly just kill everybody. But this is war. Emotions are out there, and we can't preclude anything. But there's a difficult task ahead for the Israeli Defense Forces, and we'll continue to watch. We'll bring you new updates as they come, and we'll continue to give you deep dive information so you understand what's going on behind the scenes. That's your deep dive for today. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.